The text from my mother arrived while I was at my desk, vibrating against the wood like a threat. "Stay home. Nobody wants you there." Attached was a photo of a gilded archway announcing Lila's Big 25. It wasn't just a snub, it was a delusion. My twin sister and I turned 33 last winter, but my parents were throwing a party that required my existence to be completely deleted. The vibration of my phone against the mahogany desk was not a chime or a ring, but a physical shudder, like an insect dying on the wood. It was 2 o'clock in the afternoon on a Tuesday, the kind of gray, unremarkable hour where the only sound in the office was the hum of the HVAC system and the rhythmic clicking of keyboards. I was 33 years old. I had a job that paid my rent, a car that started every morning, and a life that was aggressively, deliberately quiet. I did not like surprises. My childhood had been full of them, and none of them had been good. I looked down at the screen. The name on the display read, Mother. It was not Mom or Mama, just Mother. A contact name I had edited 5 years ago to remind myself of the professional distance I needed to maintain. I slid the phone closer. There was a single text message, written entirely in capital letters, screaming up from the illuminated glass. "Stay home. Nobody wants you there." Below the text was a photo. It was blurry, likely taken in haste, but the subject was unmistakable. It was the entrance to the Gilded Vine, the most expensive event venue in Briar Glen, the town where I had grown up and subsequently fled. In the photo, an elaborate balloon arch framed the double doors. The balloons were pearl white and metallic gold, twisted together in a spiral that looked less like a decoration and more like a strand of DNA. Suspended from the center of the arch was a large, glitter-dusted sign. Even through the blur of the low-quality photo, the words were legible. Lila's Big 25. I stared at the number, 25. I sat back in my ergonomic chair and felt the blood drain out of my face, leaving my skin cold. My twin sister, Lila, was not 25. I knew this for a fact because I was also not 25. We had turned 33 in January. We were 8 years past the quarter-life crisis, 8 years past the age of being considered a prodigy, 8 years past the expiration date of the youth my parents so desperately idolized. My mother, Marjorie Reed, was not a woman who made typos. If she wrote 25, she meant it, and if she sent me a photo of it with a command to stay away, it meant the lie was already in motion. I did not freeze because I was hurt. I froze because I recognized the strategy. It was a classic Marjorie maneuver. She would erase me first, remove me from the narrative entirely, and then, if I reacted with even a single decibel of frustration, she would turn to her audience and point at my anger as proof that I was unstable. I had not seen Lila in nearly a year. The last time we spoke, it had not been a screaming match. We did not throw vases or flip tables. It had been a quiet, suffocating conversation in her kitchen, where I asked her why she refused to contradict our parents when they lied about my career to the neighbors. Lila had just looked at me, her eyes glassy and vacant, and said she did not want to cause trouble. I walked out. We never finished the conversation. We just buried it, like we buried everything else in the Reed family. I placed the phone face down on the desk. My hands were trembling slightly. I pressed them flat against the cool laminate surface to steady them. "Stay home. Nobody wants you there." The message wasn't just an uninvite. It was a preemptive strike. By 6 o'clock that evening, the office was empty. I sat in my car in the parking garage, the engine idling, the air conditioning blasting cold air onto my face. I pulled up social media. I had blocked my parents years ago, but I had a burner account, a faceless profile I used solely for moments like this. It was a bad habit, like picking a scab, but I needed to know the blast radius. I navigated to my father's profile. Dennis Reed. There it was, posted 2 hours ago. The photo was professional quality. It showed Lila standing in a garden, wearing a pale lavender dress that looked expensive and modest. Her hair was swept back, her makeup flawless. She was smiling, but it wasn't a smile of joy. It was a smile of branding. It was the smile of a woman who knew she was being watched and wanted to make sure she passed inspection. The caption read, "So proud to celebrate our beautiful daughter Lila on her 25th birthday. A quarter of a century of light and grace. We are so blessed." I read it twice. He had written it without a hint of irony. I scrolled down to the comments. There were dozens of them. "She looks so young and fresh. Happy 25th. What a perfect family you have. Dennis, hard to believe she is 25 already. Time flies." My name was nowhere. I scrolled through every single comment. No one asked, "Where is Genesis?" No one asked, "Wait, doesn't she have a twin?" No one asked, "Did you forget the other half of your children?" It was as if I had never been born. Or worse, it was as if I had been edited out of the film entirely, left on the cutting room floor because I didn't test well with audiences. I dialed Lila's number. It rang 4 times, then went to voicemail. Her voice was bright and airy on the recording. "You have reached Lila. Leave a message." I did not leave a message. I dialed my Aunt Sarah next. Sarah was my father's sister, a woman who had spent her entire life trying to be invisible so that my father's ego wouldn't trip over her. She answered on the second ring. "Hello?" she said. Her voice sounded tight. "Aunt Sarah, it is Genesis." I said. There was a pause. A long, heavy silence that told me everything I needed to know. "Oh," she said. "Genesis. I didn't think you would be calling tonight. I saw the post." "Sarah," I said, keeping my voice level, "why are they throwing Lila a 25th birthday party? We are 33. Sarah let out a breath that sounded like a leak in a tire. "It is just a theme. Genesis. You know how your mother gets. She wanted to celebrate Lila's youth. It is not a theme," I said. "The invitation says 25th birthday. People in the comments think she is actually 25. "Well," Sarah stammered, "it is complicated. Where am I supposed to be?" "Sarah?" I asked. "If I am not there, where am I?" She hesitated. I could hear the guilt eating at her, chewing on the edges of her resolve. "They told everyone you are traveling," she whispered. "Traveling?" "They said you are in Europe. They said you didn't want to come home. They said you were too busy with your lifestyle." My lifestyle. That was code. In the Reed Family Dictionary, lifestyle meant anything that didn't involve total submission to Dennis and Marjorie Reed. "You know that is a lie." I said, "I know," Sarah said, her voice barely audible, but they said it so nicely. "Genesis. They made it sound like they were protecting you, like they didn't want people to know you had abandoned them. The words hit me like a physical blow. Abandoned them. They erased me." I said, "And then they told everyone I was the one who left. I am sorry." Sarah said. The line clicked. She had hung up. I sat in the dark car, the dashboard lights casting a sickly green glow on my hands. I closed my eyes, and I was 8 years old again. I was standing in the kitchen, watching my mother rearrange the fruit bowl for the 3rd time because the apples didn't look bountiful enough. Appearance is protection. "Genesis," she had told me, slapping my hand away when I reached for a grape. "If people think we are perfect, they cannot hurt us." "You have to look the part," I had asked. "What part?" She had looked at me with a cold, terrifying assessment, the part of someone who matters. My parents didn't have friends. They had an audience. They didn't have dinners. They had scenes. And somewhere along the line, they had decided that Lila was the star and I was the blooper reel. But this was new. This wasn't just favoring one child over the other. This was rewriting reality. I put the car in gear. I wasn't going back to my apartment. I drove out of the city, merging onto the highway that led to Briar Glen. It was an hour drive. And I spent the entire time gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. The landscape changed from concrete to manicured lawns, from apartment complexes to gated communities. Briar Glen was a town where the grass was always cut to exactly 2 inches and the police blotter was suspiciously empty. I didn't go to my parents' house. I didn't go to the venue. I drove to a small strip mall on the edge of town. pulling into the lot of a place called the Ink Quill. It was a local print shop, high-end, expensive paper, embossed lettering, the kind of place that charged $5 for a single thank you card. I used to run errands here for my mother when I was in high school. She refused to use chain stores. She said the paper quality at the chains was insulting. The shop was still open. I pushed through the glass door. The bell chiming overhead, the smell of toner and fresh paper hit me. A scent that was strangely nostalgic. The counter was manned by Mr. Henderson. He looked exactly the same as he had 15 years ago. Balding, wearing a sweater vest, glasses perched on the end of his nose. He looked up, his professional smile faltering for a split second before recognition set in. "Genesis?" he asked. "Genesis Reed?" "Hello, Mr. Henderson," I said. He looked down at his counter, then back at me. He looked nervous. "I haven't seen you in a long time. You look well." "I am fine," I said. "I was wondering if my parents' order was ready." It was a bluff, a gamble. But my parents were creatures of habit. They never changed vendors. If they found someone who tolerated their demands, they stayed with them for life. Mr. Henderson shifted his weight. He glanced toward the back room. Well, your mother picked up the boxes this morning. Genesis. She was very specific about the timing." "Right," I said, keeping my voice casual. "I figured she beat me to it. I just wanted to make sure everything printed correctly. She was worried about the color match on the gold." "Mr. Henderson relaxed slightly. "The gold was perfect," he said. "We had to run a few proofs, but we got it." He reached under the counter and pulled out a small, flat box. "Actually," he said, his voice dropping to a hush, "I am glad you came in. There was an extra one. It got stuck behind the sorter. I didn't want to throw it away, seeing as it's a big event." He slid a heavy, cream-colored envelope across the glass counter. I stared at it. It was thick, textured like linen. My name wasn't on it. It was blank. I took the envelope. "Thank you." "Mr. Henderson." He nodded, looking relieved to be rid of it. "Have a good night." Genesis. I walked out of the shop, the envelope burning a hole in my hand. I got back into my car but didn't start the engine. I turned on the overhead light and tore the seal. Inside was a card of heavy cardstock, edged in gold foil. The script was elegant, sweeping, and pretentious. "Dennis and Marjorie Reed invite you to celebrate the 25th birthday of their daughter. Lila Reed, a silver year for a golden girl." I felt a wave of nausea. Silver year. It was insane. It was a complete fabrication. But as my eyes scanned the bottom of the invitation, I saw something that made the nausea turn into a cold knot of dread. In the bottom corner, small but distinct, was a logo. It was a stylized tree with deep roots, sponsored by the Marin Ridge Foundation. I frowned. The Marin Ridge Foundation was a massive charitable trust. They gave grants for arts, education, and youth development. Why would a global foundation sponsor a birthday party for a 33-year-old woman pretending to be 25? I flipped the card over. There was fine print on the back. Usually, birthday invitations didn't have fine print. Guest compliance required. All attendees consent to a non-disclosure agreement regarding private family matters. Photography is strictly limited to authorized zones. And then, a line in bold. Age verification protocols apply for grant eligibility recipients. My mind raced. Grant eligibility? I looked into the envelope again. There was something else tucked inside. A thin sheet of paper that looked like a draft. I pulled it out. It was a seating chart. It was a preliminary print, marked with red pen. Tables were assigned numbers. Names were listed in columns. I scanned the list, looking for my parents, for Lila. And then I saw it. Table 4. The name Genesis Reed was printed there, but a thick red line had been drawn through it. It wasn't just crossed out. The name had been slashed with a ferocity that tore the paper slightly. Next to my name, written in my mother's jagged, distinctive handwriting, was a single word: unused, not declined, not absent, not regrets. Unused, like I was a prop that hadn't made the final cut. like I was a piece of cutlery that didn't match the rest of the set. I sat there, staring at the word, unused. It made me feel small. It made me feel like the little girl who hid in the pantry while her parents hosted dinner parties, terrified of spilling something on her dress. It made me want to start the car, drive back to the city, lock my door, and never speak to them again. Stay home. My mother's voice whispered in my head. Nobody wants you there. It would be so easy to obey. It would be safe. I could go home, order takeout, and pretend this wasn't happening. I could let them have their lie. I could let them have Lila. But then I looked at the logo again, the Marin Ridge Foundation, and I looked at the words, Age Verification Protocols. They weren't just lying for attention. My parents were vain. Yes, they were cruel. Yes, but they were also calculated. They didn't spend money they didn't have on a party this size just for an ego boost. This wasn't a party. It was a transaction. If Lila was pretending to be 25 and there was a foundation involved, my heart hammered against my ribs. This was fraud, and if my name was on a seating chart, even crossed out, I was close to it. I looked at the invitation one last time. The venue address was 10 minutes away. The party started at 7. It was 6:45. I wasn't dressed for a gala. I was wearing work slacks and a blouse. My hair was in a messy bun. I looked tired. I looked 33. Stay home, the text said. I put the car in reverse. I wasn't going there to beg for their love. I wasn't going there to make a scene and scream about how unfair it was that they preferred Lila. That part of me, the part that wanted a mommy and daddy to love her, had died a long time ago. I was going there because they were hiding something, and they were using my sister to do it. I pulled out of the parking lot and turned toward the Gilded Vine. I wasn't going to the party. I was going to the crime scene. The gravel driveway of the Gilded Vine crunched beneath the tires of my sedan. A sound that felt too loud, too unrefined for the hushed opulence of the estate. The venue was a sprawling neo-colonial mansion set back from the road, surrounded by oaks that had been manicured into submission. It was the kind of place where people got married to prove they had money, not because they were in love. I parked my car at the very edge of the lot, far away from the line of valets receiving luxury SUVs and vintage convertibles. I killed the engine and sat in the silence for a moment, watching the scene unfold through the windshield. It looked less like a birthday party and more like a film set. Huge floodlights bathed the entrance in a soft, flattering amber glow. A red carpet, actually red, led up the stone steps to the double doors, but the centerpiece was the lawn display. Standing 6 feet tall, crafted from white roses and illuminated from within, were the numbers 2 and 5. Guests were lining up to take photos in front of it. I watched a woman in a shimmering green gown tilt her head, pop her foot, and freeze while a man in a tuxedo snapped 3 rapid photos with a phone. Then, a staff member in a black vest stepped in, adjusted the woman's shoulder slightly to catch the light, and gestured for them to take another. Everything was staged. The lighting was positioned to erase wrinkles. The staff were directing traffic not for flow, but for angles. They were manufacturing a memory before the event had even happened. I opened my car door and stepped out. The night air was cool, but I felt a prickly heat under my collar. I smoothed down my black trousers and adjusted my blouse. I looked professional, capable, and completely out of place. I walked toward the entrance, keeping my head high. I passed a couple arguing in hushed tones about a tie clip, and a group of young women who looked like they had been cloned in a laboratory dedicated to beige silk. They all ignored me. I was just background noise. At the top of the stairs, a check-in table was draped in heavy velvet. 2 young women sat behind it, their faces illuminated by the glow of tablets. They wore matching headsets. I approached the one on the left. She looked up, her smile practiced and thin. "Welcome to the Reed celebration," she said. "Name, please?" "Genesis Reed," I said. Her fingers tapped against the screen. She frowned slightly. She tapped again, scrolling down. The smile didn't leave her face, but her eyes grew cold. "I am sorry," she said. I do not have a Genesis read on the guest list. Are you sure you are at the right event? The question was absurd. The giant 25 made of roses was visible over her shoulder. I am the sister of the birthday girl, I said. The girl stopped typing. She looked at me, really looked at me, for the first time. She took in my off-the-rack clothes, my lack of jewelry, my sensible shoes. She looked back at her list. I have a Marjorie Reed, a Dennis Reed, and a Lila Reed. She recited, and I have the extended family list. But you are not on it. She said it with a finality that was almost impressive. I reached into my bag and pulled out the cream-colored envelope Mr. Henderson had given me. I placed it on the velvet table. I have an invitation, I said. The girl picked it up. She examined the gold foil. She ran her thumb over the embossed lettering. She looked at the other attendant, who gave a subtle shrug. There was no denying the authenticity of the paper. It was the same heavy stock sitting in a stack next to her elbow. She handed it back to me, her jaw tight. My apologies, she said. There must have been a clerical error. She reached into a box beneath the table and pulled out a wristband. It was silver paper, sticky on one side. She snapped it around my wrist before I could pull away. I looked down at it. Printed in bold black letters was the word General. I looked at the guests walking past me. They were wearing gold wristbands that said VIP or family. General. I said, for the sister. The attendant didn't make eye contact. Enjoy the evening, she said, already looking over my shoulder to the next person in line. I walked through the double doors and into the ballroom. The room was vast, with ceilings that vanished into shadow and crystal chandeliers that dripped light onto the crowd. There must have been 200 people there. A string quartet played in the corner, a melody that was familiar but stripped of any emotion. Just pleasant, expensive noise. I scanned the room. It didn't take long to find them. My parents were standing near the center of the room, positioned perfectly beneath the largest chandelier. They were holding court. My father, Dennis, looked dashing in a tuxedo that fit him too well. He was laughing, a booming, resonant sound that I knew he practiced in the mirror. It was his, look at me, I am wealthy and happy laugh. He had one hand on the shoulder of a gray-haired man I didn't recognize, leaning in as if sharing a state secret. My mother, Marjorie, stood beside him. She wore a gold gown that matched the invitation script. She was smiling, but it was the smile of a shark in a tank. Her eyes were constantly moving, darting left and right, scanning the room for imperfections, for threats, for anyone who wasn't looking at her with adoration. And then there was Lila. My twin sister stood slightly in front of them, like a prize pony at an auction. She wore a pale pink dress that was lovely but oddly juvenile, with a high neck and a full skirt. Her hair was loose and curled. She looked beautiful. She also looked terrifyingly vacant. She accepted a glass of champagne from a waiter but didn't drink it. She nodded at something a woman said to her, but her eyes didn't focus. She moved with a fluidity that was unnatural, turning her body toward the cameras that were circulating the room. Every time a flash went off, she brightened, as if the light was the only thing keeping her upright. I took a breath. The air smelled of lilies and expensive perfume. I started walking toward them. I moved through the crowd, dodging waiters with trays of canapes. I felt invisible, a ghost haunting a party I was supposed to be dead to. I got within 10 feet before Marjorie saw me. Her reaction was immediate and visceral. She didn't gasp. She didn't widen her eyes. Her face simply hardened into a mask of pure granite. The smile didn't drop, but it turned into a rictus of irritation. It was the look one gives a red wine stain that has suddenly appeared on a white sofa. Not surprise, just furious inconvenience. She tapped Dennis's arm. He turned, his laughter cutting off mid-bellow. When he saw me, his eyes narrowed. He shifted his weight, turning his body to block me from the view of the gray-haired man. I stopped in front of them. "Hello, Mother," I said. "Hello, Dad." Marjorie stepped forward, closing the distance between us aggressively. She smelled of hairspray and gin. "What are you doing here?" she hissed. The sound was low, meant only for me. I received an invitation, I said calmly. I thought it would be rude to miss my sister's 25th birthday, especially since I missed the first one. Marjorie's hand twitched, as if she wanted to grab my arm, but she checked the room. Too many witnesses. You are going to ruin this, she whispered. Her voice was trembling with suppressed rage. You always have to make it about you. You could not just let her have this. Let her have what? I asked. A fake age? A lie? Dennis leaned in, his face close to mine. He smelled of mints and rot. Not now. Genesis, he murmured. His voice was a low rumble, the warning growl of a dog before it bites. Go home. We will discuss your allowance later. I stared at him. I didn't have an allowance. I hadn't taken a dime from them since I was 18. But that was the narrative, wasn't it? That I was the leech, the failure, the one who needed to be paid off. I am not leaving, I said. I stepped around him. Dennis tried to block me, but he couldn't do it without making a scene. And making a scene was the one sin the Reed family could not commit. I reached Lila. She was staring at a point over a guest's shoulder. When I touched her elbow, she jumped as if I had burned her. She spun around, her eyes wide and terrified. Genesis? She breathed. She looked at me, and for a second, the mask slipped. I saw the exhaustion in the lines of her mouth, the panic in her pupils. She looked trapped. Happy birthday. Lila, I said quietly. Her eyes flicked to the left, then the right. She was checking the cameras. A photographer was moving toward us, lens raised. Lila instinctively angled her chin down, finding her light, even while she was shaking. Please, she whispered. Her lips barely moved. Please do not do this here. Do what? I asked. Exist? Lila gripped her champagne flute so hard, I thought the stem would snap. They are watching, she said. I stepped closer to her, blocking the photographer's line of sight. Why are you doing this? I asked. Why are you calling it your 25th? We are 33. Lila, we have crow's feet. We have history. Why are you erasing 8 years of your life? Lila flinched. It was a small movement, a recoil, as if I had pressed my thumb into a deep bruise. It is complicated, she said. It is a lie. I said, you do not understand. She pleaded. Her voice was thin, brittle. It is for the future. It is for the family. Since when does the family include erasing me? I asked. Lila looked down at her shoes. They were silver heels, too high, too young. You were never good at playing the game. Genesis, she murmured. That is why you are free. The words hung in the air between us. That is why you are free. She didn't sound angry. She sounded envious. Before I could ask her what she meant, Dennis's hand clamped onto my shoulder. His grip was painful. Lila, he said, his voice loud and jovial for the benefit of the passing guests. The director wants to say hello to you. Come along. Sweetheart. He pulled her away. Lila went without resistance, floating after him like a balloon on a string. She didn't look back at me. I stood alone in the middle of the ballroom, the music swelling around me. I felt a surge of nausea. It wasn't just the lie. It was the compliance. Lila was a willing participant in her own erasure. I needed air. I needed to think. I drifted toward the edge of the room, near the bar. I ordered a club soda and stood with my back to the wall, watching the room. 2 women were standing near me, sipping martinis. They were wearing diamonds that probably cost more than my car. It is impressive, one of them said. She had a sharp nose and a sharper voice. Qualifying so young. I thought the cutoff was strictly under 26. Her friend nodded. That is the Marin Ridge standard. They are very particular about their youth achievement metrics. Most applicants age out before they can build a portfolio this strong. But Lila Reed, the first woman, mused. She has the charity work, the board presence, and now the age eligibility. Dennis must be thrilled. It unlocks the Tier 1 funding. Tier 1? The friend asked. The big grant, the first woman whispered, leaning in. The legacy disbursement. It is millions. But it is only for emerging leaders. You know, the leaders of tomorrow bracket. Once you hit 30, you are considered established. The money dries up. They clinked their glasses and drifted away. I stood there, the club soda turning warm in my hand. Qualified so young. Age eligibility. Tier 1 funding. The word qualified landed in my brain like a heavy stone. You didn't qualify for a birthday. You qualified for a loan. You qualified for a mortgage. You qualified for a grant. This wasn't vanity. Aunt Sarah had said it was about Lila's youth. But rich people didn't fake birthdays for vanity. They got Botox for that. They faked documents for money. I set my glass down on a passing tray and moved toward the side hallway. I had seen guests emerging from there with brochures. The hallway was quieter, lined with portraits of ancestors who looked as miserable as I felt. At the end of the hall, set up on an easel, was a large display board. It was professional, sleek, and terrifying. The Marin Ridge Foundation, empowering the next generation. Below the header was a list of grant categories. I scanned them: Arts Initiative, Community Outreach, Global Perspective, and then, at the bottom, highlighted in gold text, Youth Achievement Funding Eligibility Criteria. 1. Demonstrated impact and community service. 2. Clear vision for future philanthropic endeavors. 3. Candidate must be between the ages of 18 and 25 at the time of application and disbursement. I stared at the number, between 18 and 25. If Lila was 33, she was ineligible. She was 8 years past the cutoff. But if she was 25, she was the perfect candidate. She had the portfolio the women had mentioned, probably padded by my parents' connections. And now, she had the age to match. This wasn't just a party, it was the final piece of evidence for a massive fraud. They were publicly establishing her age to satisfy the foundation's auditors. The photos, the 25 balloon arch, the birthday celebration, it was all documentation. They were creating a public record of a lie. I felt a hand on my arm. I spun around. It was Aunt Sarah. She looked terrified. Her face was pale, and she was wringing her hands in the fabric of her skirt. "Genesis," she whispered, "you have to leave. Your father is furious. Let him be furious." I said. I pointed at the board. "Sarah, look at this. Do you see what this is?" Sarah wouldn't look at the board. She kept her eyes on the floor. "It is just a grant, Genesis. It is for the family business. It is fraud." "Sarah," I said, "they are lying about Lila's age to steal money from a foundation. Do you understand that? That is a crime. That is prison time." Sarah looked up at me then, and her eyes were wet. "They are desperate," she said. Her voice was barely a sound. "Desperate?" I asked. "They live in a mansion. They drive Porsches. They are broke." "Genesis," Sarah said. The words stopped me cold. "Broke? Dennis made bad investments," she whispered. "The business has been underwater for 2 years. They are living on credit. They mortgaged the house. This grant, this Marin Ridge money, it is the only thing that will save them." I stared at her. My parents, the untouchable Reeds, were drowning? "So they decided to sell Lila?" I asked. Sarah flinched. "They are not selling her. They are just adjusting the timeline. Marjorie said it was a victimless crime. The foundation has so much money. They won't miss it." And Lila agreed. Lila agreed because she has never been allowed to have a thought of her own. I said. Sarah grabbed my hand. Her palms were damp. "Please, Genesis, just go. If you expose this, you destroy them. You destroy all of us." I pulled my hand away. "They destroyed me a long time ago, Sarah, and now they are using my invisibility to commit a felony." I walked past her, back toward the main room. I needed to see Dennis. I needed to see the man who was willing to rewrite his daughter's existence for a check. The ballroom was louder now. The alcohol was flowing, and the guests were looser. I scanned the room for my father. I saw him near the far wall, by a heavy oak door that led to the estate's private offices. He wasn't laughing anymore. He was standing close to a man I hadn't seen before. The man was wearing a black suit, not a tuxedo, a business suit. It was sharp, tailored, and utterly serious. He didn't have a drink in his hand. He didn't look like a guest. He looked like a lawyer or an undertaker. He was speaking to Dennis in a low voice, tapping a folder he held against his thigh. Dennis looked diminished. His shoulders were slumped. He was nodding rapidly, a nervous, jerky motion that was completely unlike his public persona. I started to move toward them, threading my way through the crowd. Dennis looked up. He saw me. His reaction was instantaneous. He stepped sideways, placing his broad back between me and the man in the black suit. It was a shield wall. He said something to the man, who nodded and turned, disappearing through the oak door. Dennis stood in front of it, crossing his arms, his eyes locking onto mine with a look of pure warning. He was guarding the door. I stopped. I couldn't get past him without a physical altercation. And I wasn't ready for that, not yet. I turned away, my heart pounding in my throat. I needed to get out. I needed to process what Sarah had told me. They are broke. I walked toward the exit, my head down. I passed the gift table near the door. It was piled high with wrapped boxes, silver and gold, towering like a monument to greed. But at the end of the table, separated from the gifts, was a stack of large manila envelopes. They looked official. A small placard in front of them read, "Verification documents for staff collection." I slowed down. Verification documents? I glanced around. The attendants were busy tagging gifts. No one was looking at me. I reached out and lifted the top flap of the first unsealed envelope. It was a form, Affidavit of Identity and Eligibility. I scanned the page. It was filled out in Lila's name. Birth date, February 3rd, 2001. 2001? A lie printed in black ink, but my eyes drifted to the bottom of the page, to the witness line. There was a signature there. It was scrawled in blue ink, looping and distinctive. I knew that signature. I had spent years perfecting it in grade school. I had signed it on leases, on checks, on tax returns. It read, Genesis Reed. I stared at it. The room seemed to tilt on its axis. I hadn't signed this. I hadn't seen this document in my life. I looked at the date next to the signature. February 2nd, 2026. Yesterday. Someone had signed my name. Someone had forged my signature to witness my sister's fake birth date. My hands went cold, a numbness spreading up my arms to my chest. This wasn't just erasing me. This was using me. They needed a witness who knew the family history, someone who could verify the lie. And since I wasn't there to object, they had simply become me. I dropped the flap of the envelope. I looked up. Across the room, Marjorie was watching me. She wasn't smiling anymore. She was raising a glass of champagne to her lips. Her eyes locked on mine over the rim. It was a challenge. What are you going to do about it? I backed away from the table. I turned and walked out the double doors, past the general wristband girl, down the red carpet, and into the cool darkness of the parking lot. I got into my car and locked the doors. My hands were shaking so badly I couldn't get the key into the ignition. I took a deep breath, then another. Stay home, they had said. I looked at the venue, glowing like a lantern in the night. They had forged my signature. They had stolen my name. They had turned my identity into a tool to secure their fraud. I started the car. I wasn't going home. I was going to war. The morning sun did not bring clarity. It brought a headache that throbbed behind my eyes like a second heartbeat. I sat at my kitchen table, a cup of black coffee cooling untouched in front of me. On the table lay a notepad where I had written 3 words. Fraud, identity, theft. I picked up my phone. It was 9 o'clock in the morning. I dialed the number for Hawthorne and Pike, a law firm I had found online. They were not the most expensive firm in the city, but they specialized in family estate law and financial disputes. I needed someone who understood the architecture of a lie. A receptionist answered, her voice crisp and efficient. I asked to speak to an associate. After 3 minutes of hold music, a sterile classical loop, a man came on the line. "This is Mr. Vance," he said. "How can I help you?" I took a breath. I kept my voice steady, though my hand was gripping the phone tight enough to turn my knuckles white. "I have a hypothetical question." I said, "Mr. Vance paused. "Go ahead. If a person's signature was forged on a legal affidavit to verify false information for a financial grant," I said, "and that person is now listed as a witness to a fraudulent document without their consent, what is their legal exposure?" The silence on the other end of the line changed texture. It went from casual professional courtesy to sharp, predatory attention. "That is a very specific hypothetical." "Mr. Vance said slowly, "I am asking about liability." I said, "If the grant is issued, am I an accomplice? If you know about it and do nothing?" "Yes, you could be considered complicit," he said. His tone was careful, stripped of any warmth. "If the sum is significant, you are looking at felony fraud. If you did not sign it, you need to prove it immediately. You need to file a police report. You need to notify the issuing body." I closed my eyes. A police report. That would mean arresting my parents. That would mean handcuffs on Dennis and Marjorie Reed. "Thank you," I said. I hung up before he could ask for my name. My next stop was Westbridge Community Hospital. It was the hospital where Lila and I were born, a brick building on the edge of the county that smelled of antiseptic and floor wax. I walked into the records office, a basement room that felt more like a bunker than a medical department. The clerk was a woman in her 50s with reading glasses on a chain. She looked up as I approached the plexiglass window. "I need to request my own vital records." I said, "My full birth certificate, and the intake logs from my birth." "Name?" she asked. "Genesis Reed, born January 18th, 1993. She typed into her computer, her eyebrows knit together. She typed again, harder this time, as if the keys were resisting her. "That is odd." She murmured, "What is odd?" I asked. She turned the screen slightly away from me, a reflexive move of privacy. "Your file has a lot of activity." She said, "Usually, birth records sit in the dark for decades. But yours? And your sister's. There have been certified reissues requested every few years." "Reissues?" I asked. "New copies," she explained. "Certified extracts. We had a request in 2015, another in 2019, and a rush order 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks ago. Right before the invitations went out." "Who requested them?" I asked. She squinted at the screen. "The parents, Dennis and Marjorie Reed." I felt a cold prickle on the back of my neck. Why would they need new birth certificates every 4 years? "Can I see the log?" I asked. "I cannot show you the request forms without a subpoena," she said, her voice softening. "But I can tell you that usually, people only need these for big life events, passports, marriage licenses, or legal name changes." She looked at me with a sudden, sharp curiosity. "Did you change your name?" she asked. "No," I said. "I am still Genesis." She printed out my copy. As she handed it to me, she hesitated. "Be careful, honey," she said quietly. "Paperwork tells stories people do not always want to hear." I took the document and walked out into the bright, blinding parking lot. I sat in my car and stared at the paper. It was valid. It listed my birth date correctly. But the history of requests bothered me. It suggested that my identity was not just a fact to my parents. It was a tool they kept pulling out of the drawer. I drove toward downtown Briar Glen. As I drove, memories started to drift up from the silt of my childhood. Things I had ignored or suppressed. I remembered being 22. I was home from college for the weekend. My father had put a stack of documents in front of me at the dinner table. "Just sign these, General," he had said, "chewing on a steak. Tax restructuring. Do not bore yourself with the details." I had asked what they were. "Do not make it complicated." He had snapped, "We are paying your tuition. The least you can do is help us keep the house." I had signed. I remembered being 26. My mother pushing a form across the granite island in the kitchen. "It is just an insurance adjustment," she had said. not looking at me. Sign here. And here, I had signed. I had spent my entire adult life trying to buy peace with my signature. I thought I was being a good daughter. I thought I was paying rent for the space I took up in their world. I realize now that I hadn't been paying rent. I had been handing them ammunition. I pulled into the parking lot of the Roasted Bean, a coffee shop that had been the epicenter of social life in Briar Glen since high school. I was meeting Elena. Elena and I had been close in high school, but we had drifted apart as I pulled away from the town, and she dug her roots deeper. She was now a real estate agent, the kind of person who knew everyone's mortgage rate and marital problems. She was waiting for me at a corner table, nursing a latte. She looked impeccable. Of course, in Briar Glen, looking disheveled was considered a moral failing. "Genesis," she said, standing up to hug me, "you look intense." I sat down. I did not order coffee. I need to know what people are saying. "Elena," I said. She sighed and sat back down. She didn't pretend to misunderstand. "About the party?" she asked. "About me?" I said, "About why I wasn't there. About the 25th birthday nonsense." Elena traced the rim of her cup with a manicured nail. She looked uncomfortable. "Look, gents," she began. "You know how your parents are. They spin things." "What is the spin?" I asked. She hesitated, then looked me in the eye. "They are saying you are having a breakdown," she said softly. I felt a hollow thud in my chest. A breakdown. "They tell people you are confused." Elena continued, "that you have been struggling with reality for a while. They said you refused to come to the party because you could not handle Lila's success. They said you are jealous to the point of being dangerous." "Dangerous?" I repeated. Elena nodded. "Marjorie told the girls at the club that you have been sending threatening texts, that you are obsessed with the idea that they love Lila more. She plays the victim so well. She cries. She says, 'We just want her to get help.'" I laughed. It was a dry, cracking sound. "So the party wasn't just a celebration," I said. "It was a character assassination." Elena leaned forward. "People believe them. Jenna, you are never here. You do not defend yourself. They fill the silence with whatever story they want. And right now, the story is that Lila is the golden child, and you are the unstable one who needs to be managed." "And the age thing?" I asked. "The fact that Lila is obviously not 25? Elena shrugged. "People think it is weird. Sure, but your dad laughs it off. He calls it Lila's Hollywood age. He makes it sound like an inside joke. And since everyone wants to be invited to the parties, no one questions it." She reached out and touched my hand. "Why are you asking all this now?" she asked. "Why did you come back?" "Because they forged my signature." I said. Elena pulled her hand back as if she had been stung. "What?" "They forged my signature on legal documents." I said, "To prove Lila is 25. Elena's face went pale. "That is serious." "I know." I said. I stood up. "Thank you." "Elena, where are you going?" she asked. "To get the receipts." I said. I left the coffee shop and drove to the post office. I had a P.O. box there that I used for sensitive mail. I had set up a forward on my parents' address years ago for anything that came in my name. A small act of rebellion that I had almost forgotten about. There was a large envelope inside. It was from the Marin Ridge Foundation. I took it to the car and tore it open. It wasn't the rejection letter I had expected. It was a copy of the eligibility packet. I had requested it through their automated portal the night before, using the reference number I had memorized from the sponsor board and guessing the password. My mother's maiden name followed by the year she was married. Security was lax when you were family. I flipped through the pages. There it was. Affidavit of age and identity. Lila's photo was clipped to the top. But the birth date listed was February 3rd, 2001, and at the bottom, the witness signature, Genesis Reed. I stared at it. It was a good forgery. It had the loop on the G that I used to do. It had the sharp slant of the R, but the pressure was wrong. The ink was too heavy at the start of the letters, as if the person signing was hesitating, thinking about the shape before making it. Someone had practiced. I flipped to the next page. It was a financial disclosure. It listed a trust account, the Reed Family Preservation Trust. Beneficiary, Lila Reed. Trigger event, 25th birthday. I frowned. A trust? I didn't know we had a trust. My parents always complained about money, about the market, about expenses. I looked at the date on the trust formation. It was old. It was dated 30 years ago. Suddenly, a memory flashed in my mind. My grandmother, my father's mother, Grandma Rose. She had been the only person in the family who didn't look at me like I was a disappointment. She had died 5 years ago. When she died, she had left me a small box. My parents had tried to take it, claiming it was family property, but I had hidden it in the trunk of my car before the funeral. I had never opened it. I had been too grief-stricken, too angry. I drove back to my apartment in the city. It was an hour drive, and I sped the whole way. I ran up the stairs to my closet. I dug through the back, behind the winter coats and the boxes of college textbooks. There it was, a wooden box, inlaid with mother of pearl. I sat on the floor and opened it. Inside was a silk scarf that still smelled like her lavender perfume. There was a pair of pearl earrings, and there was a sealed envelope. On the front of the envelope, in shaky, spiderweb handwriting, were the words, "If you ever feel crazy, check the facts." I tore it open. There was a key inside, a small, brass key, and a single sheet of paper. It was a photocopy of a legal document, summary of trust provisions. I read it. Grantor, Rosemary Reed. Primary beneficiaries, Lila Reed and Genesis Reed. Distribution schedule. 1. Upon reaching the age of 25, each beneficiary shall receive a disbursement of $1 million from the principal. 2. If a beneficiary is deemed incapacitated or deceased, their share shall revert to the surviving beneficiary. 3. Verification of age and identity must be conducted by Marin Ridge Fiduciary Services. I read it 3 times. $1 million. At 25. We turned 25 8 years ago. I thought back to that year. I was living in a studio apartment, eating ramen. I had asked my father for help with a deposit on a better car, and he had told me money was tight. Where was the money? I looked at the document again. Verification of age and identity. If we turned 25 and no money was released, why? I picked up my phone and dialed the number for Marin Ridge Fiduciary Services listed on the letterhead. It was a long shot. The document was old. A woman answered. Marin Ridge Fiduciary. I am calling about the Rosemary Reed Trust. I said, my name is Genesis Reed. There was a pause, the clicking of keys. 1 moment. Ms. Reed, I see the file. I held my breath. I am checking on the status of the disbursement. I said. The woman hummed. Well, the file is currently active. We are pending the final age verification for the beneficiary, Lila Reed. Pending? I asked. But she is 33. The woman stopped typing. I have a document here submitted by the trustee, Dennis Reed, stating that the birth records were amended due to a clerical error at the hospital. The official claim is that Lila Reed was born in 2001. We are currently processing the release based on her reaching the age of majority under the trust terms. My head spun. They had rewritten history not just for a party, but to trick the trust. And what about my share? I asked. Genesis Reed. The woman was silent for a long moment. Ms. Reed, the file lists you as unavailable. Unavailable? The notes say that Genesis Reed waived her claim in 2018 due to personal reasons and transferred her beneficiary interest to the estate. I stood up. The room felt too small. I never waived anything. I said, there is a signed waiver on file. The woman said, it is notarized. I felt sick. 2018. That was the year I was 25. That was the year my mother had me sign the insurance adjustments. They had stolen my inheritance. They had tricked me into signing it away, and now they were trying to get Lila's share. But because they had missed the deadline, because Lila was already 33 and the trust likely had an expiration or a specific release window they had blown, they had to reset the clock. They had to make her 25 again to trigger the payout. It wasn't just fraud. It was a long con. They had looted my future, spent it, and now they were cannibalizing Lila's reality to get a second helping. I thanked the woman and hung up. I looked at the key in my hand. It was the key to the truth. My grandmother knew. She knew they were capable of this. I grabbed my coat. I wasn't going to a lawyer. I wasn't going to the police. Not yet. I was going to Lila. Lila lived in a luxury apartment complex near the river. It was a building with a doorman and a marble lobby. Paid for, I assumed, by the debt my parents were drowning in. I didn't buzz up. I waited by the service entrance until a delivery guy walked out, and I caught the door before it latched. I took the elevator to the 12th floor. I walked to door 12B. I pounded on the door. "Lila!" I called out. "Open the door." I heard shuffling inside. Then silence. "Lila, I know you are in there. I have the trust documents." The lock clicked. The door opened 3 inches. Lila stood there, wearing a silk robe, her face scrubbed clean of makeup. She looked younger without the paint, but her eyes were old. "Go away." "Genesis," she whispered. I pushed the door open. She stumbled back. "We are going to talk," I said. I walked into her living room. It was decorated like a showroom. Beige furniture, abstract art, nothing personal, no photos, no clutter. It was a stage set, just like the party. I threw the Marin Ridge packet on the coffee table. It landed with a heavy slap. "I know about the trust," I said. "Grandma Rose left us $1 million each." Lila didn't look at the packet. She wrapped her arms around herself, shivering though the room was warm. "You were not supposed to know," she said. "I know you spent mine." I said, "I know Mom and Dad tricked me into signing it over." Lila closed her eyes. "They needed it. Jen, the business, the house. I do not care about the house," I shouted. "I was eating instant noodles while you were living here." I stepped closer to her. "And now you are pretending to be 25 so they can get your share, because they spent mine, and they spent their own. And now they need yours." Lila sank onto the beige sofa. She curled her legs up, making herself small. "It is the only way," she whispered. "If we do not get the release, we lose everything. They will lose the house. They will go bankrupt." "So you become a fraud?" I asked. "You let them erase 8 years of your life? You let them paint me as a lunatic so no one believes me if I talk?" Lila looked up at me. Her eyes were wet. "I did not have a choice." She said, "You always have a choice." I said, "You could have said no." "They said it would be easy," she sobbed. "They said no one would check the math. They said—" She hesitated. "They said what?" I demanded. "They said you wouldn't mind," she whispered. I stared at her. "I wouldn't mind?" They said, "Genesis won't matter," Lila recited, her voice hollow. "Genesis always gets over it. She is strong. She can handle being the villain. You need to be the princess. Lila, Genesis is the soldier." I felt a sharp, physical pain in my chest. It was worse than anger. It was the realization of my role in their play. I wasn't a daughter. I was the disposal unit for their sins. I was the one who could take the hits so Lila could stay clean. "And you agreed?" I asked. My voice was barely a whisper. Lila wiped her face. "I signed the papers. Jen, I am sorry, but I signed them. I am 25 on paper now. It is done. It is not done." I said. I reached for the packet on the table. "They forged my signature as a witness." "Lila, that makes me liable. That makes me part of the crime." Lila's eyes widened. She shook her head. "I didn't do that." She said, "I swear, Mom did that. She practiced all night at the kitchen table. She said it was just a formality that sends me to prison." I said, I looked at my sister, my twin, the person who had shared a womb with me. She was a stranger. She was a beautiful, hollow shell filled with our parents' needs. I picked up the packet. "I'm not going to let them do this," I said. Lila stood up. Panic flared in her eyes. "What are you going to do?" she asked. "I am going to stop it," I said. Lila grabbed my arm. Her grip was weak, trembling. "They will destroy you. Jenny, They have a file on you. They have emails, texts. They have been saving things for years to prove you are unstable. If you go against them, they will release it all. You will lose your job. You will lose your reputation. Let them try. I said. I pulled my arm free. I walked to the door. I put my hand on the knob. One last thing. Lila. I said without turning around. She didn't answer. I could hear her breathing, ragged and terrified. Happy birthday, I said. I walked out and let the heavy door slam shut behind me. I stood in the hallway for a moment, listening to the silence. Genesis always gets over it. Not this time. I took the elevator down to the lobby. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a text from my mother. We need to talk. Come to the house for dinner. Dad is making your favorite. It was the bait, the lure. Come back. Let us smooth it over. Let us gaslight you until you believe up is down. I deleted the message. I walked out into the city. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the pavement. I felt a cold resolve settling in my bones. I wasn't the soldier anymore. I was the enemy, and I had the ammunition. I got into my car and placed the Marin Ridge packet on the passenger seat. I looked at the forged signature one last time. It was time to meet with Hawthorne and Pike again. Not for a hypothetical, for a war strategy. The attack did not come with a scream or a slammed door. It arrived quietly, digitally, at 10 o'clock on a Wednesday morning, sliding into my boss's inbox with the subject line, Concern regarding Genesis Reed. I was sitting at my desk, reviewing a spreadsheet for the quarterly audit, when the summons came. My boss, a pragmatic woman named Karen who usually communicated in monosyllables, asked me to come to her office. Her door was closed. That was the first sign. I walked in. Karen did not gesture for me to sit. She stood behind her desk, looking at a printout in her hand with an expression of mild distaste. Genesis, she said. We received an email this morning. It was sent to the general inquiry box, but it was flagged for my attention. She slid the paper across the desk. I picked it up. The sender address was a throwaway account. Concerned Family 99, but the voice was unmistakable. It was a voice that had narrated my insecurities for 3 decades. Dear Management, we are writing to you with heavy hearts regarding our daughter. Genesis, we feel it is responsible to inform you that she is currently going through a severe mental health crisis. She has been harassing family members, exhibiting paranoid behavior, and making threats of financial sabotage against her sister. We are doing our best to get her the help she needs. But we wanted to ensure her workplace was aware of her instability, as she often confuses professional boundaries with personal grievances. Please be patient with her. Sincerely. The Reed Family. I read it twice. The room seemed to tilt. The genius of the email was in its faux compassion. It wasn't angry. It was sugary, worried, and deeply professional. It painted me not as a villain, but as a liability, a broken thing that needed to be managed. It is a lie, I said. My voice sounded thin in the acoustic tiles of the office. Karen sighed. She took the paper back. I assumed as much. She said, But Genesis, this alleges harassment. It alleges threats. Corporate is allergic to drama. If your family issues spill into this office, I cannot protect you. I am not unstable. I said, I am uncovering a fraud. Karen held up a hand. Stop. I do not want to know. I do not care about your family dynamics. I care about this firm. Fix it. Genesis. Keep your ghosts at home. I walked back to my desk, my skin burning. I felt the eyes of my coworkers on me. Did they know? Had Karen told them? Paranoia, the very thing the email accused me of, began to root in my chest. My parents had escalated. They realized I wasn't staying home, so they had decided to burn the ground I stood on. They were trying to get me fired. If I lost my job, I would lose my resources. I would be desperate, and desperate people were easier to control. I sat down and logged into my personal email. I needed a win. I needed a weapon. I had filed a formal request through the Marin Ridge Foundation's online portal the night before, asking for access to the eligibility documents attached to my name. I opened my inbox. There was a reply. Subject: Access denied. Case reference: 884-B. Dear Ms. Reed, we have received your request for documentation regarding the Reed family application. Regrettably, we cannot release these files as you are not the primary applicant or an authorized administrator on the account. Please direct your inquiries to the account holder, Mr. Dennis Reed. I stared at the screen, denied, but then I saw it. Case reference: 884-B. They had given me a number. It proved a file existed. It proved there was an active case. I picked up my phone. I didn't call the main line. I searched the Foundation's directory for the compliance department. I found a generic number and dialed it. I got a voicemail. I left a message. My voice low and steady. My name is Genesis Reed. You have a file. Case 884-B. My signature is on it. I did not put it there. If you disperse funds based on that signature, you are complicit in wire fraud. Call me. I hung up. My hands were shaking. I hid them under my desk. I spent the rest of the day working in a fog, waiting for the axe to fall, for another email, for security to escort me out. But the silence held. At 7 o'clock that evening, I was in my apartment, staring at the wall. When my phone rang, the number was blocked. I answered. Hello? Is this Genesis Reed? The voice was male, deep, and cautious. Yes, this is regarding your voicemail about case 884-B. I am calling from a personal line. I am a compliance officer with the Foundation. You can call me Silas. My heart hammered against my ribs. Mr. Silas, I said, thank you for calling. Listen to me carefully. Miss Reed, he said, I cannot confirm or deny the existence of specific documents on an open line, but I need to ask you 3 questions. I am listening. 1. Did you sign an affidavit of eligibility on February 2nd of this year? No, I said. 2. Have you ever authorized a third party to sign on your behalf? No. There was a pause. I could hear him breathing on the other end. 3, he said, his voice dropping an octave. Are you safe? The question threw me. Safe? I am in my apartment. I said, that is not what I mean. Silas said, when fraud of this magnitude involves family structures, we often see pressure, coercion. If you are in danger, tell me. I am not the one in danger. I said, they are trying to destroy my reputation, but I am physically safe. Silas hummed, a low, thoughtful sound. We have flagged the file. Ms. Reed, do not confront them alone. If what you say is true, this is not just a grant application. It is a federal offense. We are watching. He hung up. We are watching. It was a small comfort, but it was something. The Foundation wasn't just a faceless bank. There were people inside who smelled the rot. But I needed more than suspicion. I needed proof of the money trail. I opened my laptop and logged into a credit monitoring service. I hadn't checked it in months. I usually just paid my bills and ignored the rest. I pulled up my report. The score was fine. But under recent activity, there was a flag. New account opened. Quick Bridge Lending. Date: January 15th, 2026. Balance: $30,000. I stopped breathing. I clicked on the details. The address listed on the account was not my apartment. It was a P.O. box in Briar Glen. My parents' P.O. box. I looked at the transaction history. The loan had been taken out in my name, using my social security number, and the disbursements? January 16th. $10,000 to the Gilded Vine venue. January 20th. $5,000 to Elite Event Catering. January 22nd. $8,000 to Reed Consulting, LLC. They were paying for the party with a loan taken out in my name. And the $8,000 to Reed Consulting? That was my father's shell company. He was paying himself a consulting fee from a fraudulent loan he stole from his daughter. I felt a surge of nausea so violent I had to run to the bathroom. I retched over the sink, nothing coming up but bile. They didn't just hate me. They were cannibalizing me. They were eating my credit, my name, my future, just to keep their lights on and their egos fed. I washed my face with cold water. I looked at myself in the mirror. My eyes were red. My skin was pale. I looked like the unstable woman they claimed I was. Fix it. Karen had said. I grabbed my keys. I drove to my father's office. It was a small, rented space in a strip mall near the highway, wedged between a dry cleaner and a vape shop. He called it the headquarters, but it was really just a place for him to hide from my mother and pretend to be a tycoon. The lights were on. I walked in without knocking. Dennis was sitting at his desk, staring at a laptop. He looked tired. The charm was gone. His face was sagging, the jowls heavy with stress. He looked up when the door chime rang. When he saw me, he didn't smile. He didn't stand up. He just took off his reading glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. I told you to stay home. Genesis, he said. I walked up to the desk. I slammed the credit report down on top of his laptop. $30,000. Dad? I asked. You stole $30,000 from me? He looked at the paper. He didn't flinch. He didn't look surprised. It is a bridge loan. Jenner, he said, his voice flat. We needed liquidity for the deposits. The grant money comes through next week. We were going to pay it off before you even knew. You forged my signature. I said, you stole my identity. That is a felony. He sighed. A long, exasperated sound. Stop using legal words you do not understand. It is family business. We are in a pinch. We did what we had to do. You tried to get me fired. I said, you emailed my boss. Dennis looked up then. His eyes were cold. Dead things. Your mother did that. He said, she thought you needed a distraction. She thought if you were busy saving your job, you would stop trying to ruin your sister's moment. My sister is 33, I shouted. She is not 25. This is not a moment. It is a crime. Dennis stood up. He was a big man, 6'2", and he used his size like a weapon. He leaned over the desk, casting a shadow over me. He lowered his voice to a growl. Do you want to destroy her? Is that it? I stood my ground. Though my knees were shaking, I want my name off that loan. If you report this, Dennis said, you kill the grant. If you kill the grant, we lose the house. We lose the cars. And Lila? Lila goes down with us. She signed the papers too. Genesis. She is the applicant. If the police come, they take her first. He leaned closer. Is that what you want? To see your twin sister in handcuffs? To see her mugshot on the news? Because that is what will happen. You will be the righteous one. Sure. But you will be the one who sent her to prison. It was a masterclass in manipulation. He wasn't denying the theft. He was holding Lila hostage. You are a monster. I whispered. I am a father doing what is necessary. He said. You were always the strong one. Genesis, you can take the hit. Lila. Lila breaks easily. Do not break your sister just to prove a point. He sat back down and put his glasses back on. Go home. Jenna, let us finish this. We will pay off the loan when the Marin Ridge check clears. No harm done. I stared at him. No harm done. I turned and walked out of the office. I sat in my car in the parking lot of the strip mall. I felt unmoored. Maybe he was right. Maybe I was being vindictive. If I went to the police, Lila would go to jail. She was a participant. Did I want that? Was I willing to burn my sister to save my credit score? The doubt crept in like smoke. Am I the villain? Am I jealous? Maybe I should just wait. I looked at the dashboard clock. 8:45. I needed an anchor. I was drifting into their narrative. I reached into the glove compartment and pulled out a notebook and a pen. Write it down. I told myself, facts. I opened the notebook and started writing. Fact 1. I am 33 years old. Fact 2. Lila is 33 years old. Fact 3. My signature on the affidavit is a forgery. Fact 4. My parents took out a $30,000 loan in my name without my consent. Fact 5. They sent an email to my employer to discredit me. Fact 6. They are soliciting a $1 million grant based on a lie. I looked at the list. The ink was dark and permanent. These weren't opinions. These weren't feelings. These were actions. Dennis had called me strong. He meant exploitable. He meant that my pain was a resource he could mine because I wouldn't collapse under the weight of it. But he was wrong. I wasn't going to collapse, but I wasn't going to carry it anymore either. My phone buzzed. A text from Lila. Meet me. The river walk. Please. I hesitated. Then I started the car. The river walk was a paved trail along the edge of the Briar Glen River. At night, it was dark and empty. I saw her sitting on a bench under a flickering street lamp. She looked different. The Lila brand was gone. She was wearing sweatpants and an oversized hoodie. Her hair was pulled back in a messy knot. Her face was bare. No foundation. No mascara. She looked pale and exhausted. She looked like me. I sat down on the other end of the bench. We sat in silence for a long time, listening to the water rush over the rocks. They told me you went to Dad, she said quietly. I did. He says you are going to call the police. I might, I said. Lila turned to look at me. Her eyes were rimmed with red. Please don't. Jen, why? I asked. Why should I protect them? They opened a loan in my name. Lila. They are stealing from me to pay for your party. Lila flinched. I didn't know about the loan. I swear. You knew about the age. I said, you knew about the Marin Ridge fraud. Lila pulled her knees up to her chest. It started small. She said, just adjusting a date on a bio for a charity gala. Mom said it looked better if I was a young prodigy. Then it became a driver's license. Then the trust. It just snowballed. Why did you agree? I asked. Lila rested her chin on her knees. Because they promised it would fix everything, she said. The debt. Jenna, it is bad. They owe money to everyone. The banks, private lenders, even some bad people. Dad said if we get the Marin Ridge grant, we can wipe the slate clean. We can start over. And if you don't, then we lose the house, she said. And Dad says, he says he might do something stupid. I looked at the water. Suicide baiting, another classic Dennis move. Lila, I said, you are 33, you can walk away, you can get a job, you can live your own life. Lila laughed. A bitter, broken sound. A job? Doing what? I have never worked a real day in my life. I am a professional daughter. That is my resume. Lila Reed. Muse. She looked at me, and her expression shifted. It wasn't just fear anymore. It was shame. I tried to back out. Jenra, last week, I told Mom I couldn't do the party. I told her I couldn't lie to you anymore. And she told me that if I ruined this, she would release the journals. My blood ran cold. The journals. When I was a teenager, I had written everything down. My anger, my depression, my dark thoughts about the family. I had kept them in a box under my bed. They had disappeared when I went to college. I thought I had lost them. She has them? I whispered. Lila nodded. She scanned them. She has PDF files. Jen. She said she would leak them to your job, to your friends, to the internet. She would prove you were disturbed since childhood. She said she would ruin you so thoroughly that no one would ever hire you again. I stared at my sister. So you stayed in the lie to protect me? I asked. Lila looked away. No, I stayed because I was scared she would do it to me. Too. I felt a strange clarity settle over me. The love I had sought from them, the approval I had chased. It was never there. I was a hostage. Lila was a hostage. We were just in different cells. I asked the question that had been haunting me since the text message. Why do they hate me so much? Lila? Lila looked at me. Her gaze was steady for the first time. They don't hate you. Jenna, she said. Then what is it? They hate what you remind them of. What? I asked. What do I remind them of? Lila hesitated. She looked like she was standing on the edge of a cliff. You remind them of the mistake, she whispered. What mistake? Lila shook her head. I don't know the whole story, but I heard them arguing once about the hospital, about the twin designation. Twin designation? Lila rubbed her arms. Dad shouted that they should have fixed it sooner. that they should have swapped the designations before the records were sealed. I don't know what it means. But Jen, they look at you and they see something they messed up, and they look at me and they see the fix. She stood up. She pulled her hood over her head, the man in the black suit. She said, "The one at the party?" "Yes, he isn't security." Lila said, "He is an archivist. He is there to collect the documents. Once the party is over, once the announcement is made, he takes the files and they are sealed in the foundation vault. If you are going to stop them, you have to do it before he leaves on Saturday." She turned to walk away. "Lila," I said. She stopped. "If I stop them, everything burns." I said, "The house, the money, the reputation." Lila didn't look back. "Let it burn," she whispered. She walked into the darkness. I sat on the bench for a long time. Twin designation. Swap the designations. I pulled out my phone and opened the photo I had taken of my medical records. I zoomed in on the notes section. There it was, a line I had missed before because it was written in shorthand. January 18th, 1993. 4:12 a.m., Twin A/Twin B designation amended per parental rec. Vital stats reassigned. Reassigned. It was a clerical term, but in the context of my family, it felt like a confession. I closed the phone. I wasn't going to cry anymore. I wasn't going to beg Dennis for mercy. I wasn't going to ask Marjorie for love. I was done with feelings. Feelings were messy. Feelings could be manipulated. Documents could not. I stood up and walked back to my car. The night air was crisp. Saturday was the party. Saturday was the announcement. I had 3 days to build a bomb. Not out of gunpowder, but out of paper. I drove back to my apartment. I didn't turn on the lights. I sat in the glow of my laptop screen and opened a new file. I named it The Correction. I started typing. The conference room at Hawthorne and Pike was sterile, smelling of lemon polish and expensive coffee. I sat on one side of the mahogany table, and Mr. Vance sat on the other. Between us lay a stack of papers that dismantled the last 33 years of my life. I had organized the evidence into 3 neat piles. The first pile was the financial fraud. It contained the credit report showing the loan taken out in my name, $30,000 borrowed against a future I did not authorize, funneled into my father's shell company. The second pile was the affidavit, the Marin Ridge Foundation eligibility packet, featuring a signature that looked like mine but wasn't. The loops were too hesitant, the ink pressure uneven. It was a forgery committed by a hand that knew my name better than I did. The third pile was the oldest. It was the copy of the trust document from my grandmother, the one that proved my parents had already drained my inheritance and were now cannibalizing my sister's existence to access a second payout. Mr. Vance picked up the affidavit. He adjusted his glasses, scanning the document with the dispassionate eye of a surgeon looking for a tumor. "This is a felony," he said quietly. He didn't ask me if I was sure. He didn't ask if there was a misunderstanding. The paper spoke for itself. "If we file this," Mr. Vance continued, looking up at me, "we are initiating a criminal investigation. This is not just a civil suit to stop a grant. This is wire fraud. This is identity theft. This is grand larceny." I nodded. "I know." He leaned back in his chair, clasping his hands over his stomach. "I have a duty to warn you. Genesis, in cases like this, where the defendants are immediate family, the fallout is total. There is no going back to Thanksgiving dinner after this. Once we file these motions, once we serve these papers, you are nuking the bridge. Your parents may never forgive you." I looked at the documents. I thought about the text messages telling me to stay home. I thought about the loan taken out in my name. I thought about the way my mother looked at me, like I was a stain on her white carpet. "They already don't," I said. My voice was steady. It surprised me. I expected to feel grief, but all I felt was the cold, hard weight of necessity. "Mr. Vance nodded slowly. He opened a folder. "Then we proceed. We will file for an emergency injunction to halt the disbursement of the Marin Ridge funds. We will file a police report regarding the identity theft, and we will serve them with a notice of civil litigation for the fraudulent loan. When? I asked. The grant is scheduled to be announced Saturday night. He said, at the party, we need to stop it before the check clears. We will serve them at the event. At the party? I asked. It is the only way to ensure they cannot hide, he said. If we send it to the house, they will claim they never received it. They will dodge the process server, but at a public event, surrounded by witnesses, they have to take it. It was brutal. It was public execution by paperwork. Do it, I said. I left the law office feeling lighter, as if I had finally put down a heavy backpack I had been carrying since childhood. I checked my phone. There was a text from Lila. I have something. Come alone. My stomach tightened. Come alone. It was the classic opening line of a trap. But I knew Lila. She wasn't the trap setter. She was the bait. I texted back. Where? My apartment, she replied. Parking garage? Level B? Inside my car? Please hurry. I drove to her building. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the city. The parking garage was cool and smelled of exhaust and concrete dust. I found Lila's white SUV parked in the back corner, tucked away from the security cameras. I tapped on the window. Lila unlocked the doors. I slipped into the passenger seat. She looked worse than she had at the river. Her eyes were swollen, her hands trembling so hard she could barely hold the steering wheel. On her lap sat a small silver flash drive and a digital voice recorder. I stole it, she whispered. Stole what? I asked. Lila picked up the recorder. Her thumb hovered over the play button. I have been recording them, Jen, she said. For weeks, ever since they started making me memorize the new timeline. I felt like I was going crazy. I needed to hear it back to make sure I wasn't imagining it. She pressed play. The sound of my mother's voice filled the small cabin of the car. It was sharp, impatient. The tone she used when a servant wasn't moving fast enough. Stop crying. Lila, it is just a date. You are 25. Say it. I am 33. Mom. Lila's voice on the recording was weak, watery. Do not say that number, Dennis's voice boomed in the background. That number does not exist. You were born in 2001. There was a clerical error at the hospital. We fixed it. That is the truth. But Genesis... Lila whimpered. Genesis is gone. Marjorie snapped. Genesis is not part of this family's future. She is the past. You are the future. Now sign the paper. Use the loop I showed you. The recording clicked off. I sat in the silence, listening to the hum of the parking garage lights. They coached you on the forgery, I said. Lila nodded. She picked up the flash drive. But that is not the worst part. She handed me the drive. It is not just a lie about my age, she said. It is not just pretending. They made me a new person. What do you mean? Lila took a breath that shuddered in her chest. They got new documents, she said. Not just the birth certificate. They got a new social security number. They used a loophole for identity compromise victims and combined it with the corrected birth record. They created a credit file. They created a tax history. I stared at the drive. Lila Reed, age 25. Is not me pretending to be young, she whispered. Lila Reed, age 25, is a legal entity they built from scratch. She has a passport. She has bank accounts. She is a paper person. My mind reeled. This wasn't just fraud. This was high-level identity manufacturing. It required lawyers, doctors, and likely a few bribes. Why? I asked. Why go to this length? Because of the background check. Lila said, the Marin Ridge Foundation runs a deep check. If I was just 33 pretending to be 25, the social security dates wouldn't match. The school records wouldn't match. So they erased the old Lila. They sealed my high school records. They paid someone to purge the college transcripts. They erased you. I said. Lila looked at me, her eyes hollow. I do not exist anymore. Genuo, the Lila who is 33? The one who is your twin? She is gone, legally. She has been subsumed into this new person. I am a ghost in my own life. She grabbed my hand. Her fingers were ice cold. You have to help me. Jen, when this blows up, and I know it is going to blow up, They are going to say I did it. They are going to blame you? They already have the script. She said, I heard them talking last night. If the foundation finds out, they are going to say I was the one who was obsessed with youth, that I forged the documents because I couldn't handle aging, that they were just supportive parents who didn't know the extent of my delusion. I looked at the flash drive in my hand. It was the smoking gun. It proved coercion. It proved conspiracy. I will not let them pin this on you. I said. Lila started to cry. Silent, racking sobs. I am so scared. Jenna, I am so scared of them. I looked at my sister. For years, I had resented her. I had thought she was the golden child, the one who got the love I was denied. I realized now that she hadn't gotten love. She had gotten consumption. They had eaten her alive. I put the flash drive in my pocket. Go home, I said. Keep your head down. Do not sign anything else. What are you going to do? She asked. I'm going to finish the story. I said. I left Lila in the garage and drove back to my apartment. It was late, but I wasn't tired. I felt a buzzing energy, the adrenaline of the hunt. I sat at my desk and pulled up the number for Silas, the compliance officer. It was past business hours, but he had called me from a personal cell. I dialed. He picked up on the second ring. Silas, Ms. Reed, I have confirmation. I said, it is not just a falsified application, it is a synthetic identity. They created a new legal persona for my sister to bypass your age verification protocols. There was a long silence on the line. Then the sound of a pen scratching on paper. Synthetic identity. Silas repeated, that is sophisticated. They sealed her real records. I said, they obtained a new social security number under false pretenses, and I have audio evidence of them coaching her to commit the fraud. Do not send me the audio yet, Silas said sharply. If you send it now, it becomes discoverable evidence and I have to turn it over to legal immediately. That might trigger a freeze before the event. Isn't that what we want? I asked. To stop the money? We want to stop the money. Yes, Silas said. But if we freeze it tonight, your parents will know. They will run. They will destroy the physical documents before we can secure them. He paused. We need the original eligibility packet. Ms. Reed, the one with the wet signatures, the one they are planning to hand over at the ceremony. The ceremony? There is a handover scheduled, Silas said. At the party. Your father is supposed to present the final verification dossier to the foundation director on stage. It is a ceremonial gesture, but that dossier contains the original forged documents. We need to secure that physical file to prove the intent to defraud. So we wait for the party. I said, we wait, Silas said. But Ms. Reed, I need to warn you again. What? If they went to the trouble of creating a synthetic identity, they have exposed themselves to massive liability. People who have committed crimes this complex do not react well to exposure. Do not confront them alone at the event. Stay in public view. I understand. I said. I hung up. The warning echoed in my head. Do not confront them alone. My phone buzzed again. It was a text from my mother. I stared at the notification. Marjorie Reed. Genesis. I am sitting here looking at your baby pictures. You were such a sweet child. I do not know where we went wrong. You always choose conflict. You always embarrass us. Why can't you just love your sister? We are doing this for her future. Please, just stay home and let us be a family. It was a masterpiece. It read like a plea from a heartbroken mother, looking at baby pictures. Sweet child. Where we went wrong. But I knew the code. You always choose conflict meant stop resisting. You always embarrass us meant stop telling the truth. Why can't you love your sister was the trap. It was the line she would show people later. Look, I begged her to love Lila, and she attacked us. She was creating a paper trail of her own, a trail of text messages that painted her as the peacemaker and me as the aggressor. I didn't reply. I took a screenshot of the text and emailed it to Mr. Vance. Add this to the harassment file. I typed, I didn't sleep that night. I spent the hours going over the plan in my head. Mr. Vance had arranged for a process server to be at the party. He would be dressed as a guest. He would wait for the signal. The signal was the announcement. I learned about this special moment from the event schedule Lila had forwarded me. At 9 o'clock, after the dinner, Dennis was scheduled to make a toast. He would announce the Marin Ridge Partnership and publicly accept the first installment of the funding, a ceremonial check for $1 million. That was the moment, when he held up the check, when the lie was solid and physical in his hands. That was when we would strike. Saturday arrived with a gray, steel sky. It looked like snow. I dressed with the precision of a soldier putting on armor. I chose a dress I had bought specifically for this night. It was black, severe, and sharp. It had long sleeves and a high neck, but the back was open, a slash of skin that felt like a vulnerability I was daring them to exploit. I did my hair in a tight knot. I put on dark lipstick. I looked in the mirror. I didn't look like the unstable daughter. I didn't look like the jealous sister. I looked like a reaper. I felt strangely calm. For years, every interaction with my parents had been a desperate scramble for approval. I wanted them to see me. I wanted them to say, "Good job, Genesis." I wanted them to love me. That want was dead. It had died in the records room of the hospital. It had died when I saw my forged signature. It had died when I heard my mother's voice on the recording telling Lila that I was gone. I wasn't going to the party to win. I wasn't going to get an apology. I knew that. I was going to stop the rewrite. I was going to make sure that the truth, the ugly, messy, 33-year-old truth, survived. My phone buzzed one last time as I was putting on my coat. It was Lila. The man in the black suit isn't security. He's not here for them. He's here for the files. I stopped. The man in the black suit. I had seen him talking to Dennis. Lila said he was an archivist. He's not here for them. What did that mean? If he wasn't working for my parents, who was he working for? Was he working for the foundation? No. Silas would have told me. Was he a cleaner? Someone my parents hired to destroy the evidence once the check cleared? He is here for the files. That meant he was going to take the dossier. The dossier with the wet signatures. The dossier Silas said we needed to prove the crime. If the man in the black suit took the files before the process server could intervene, the evidence would disappear. My parents would get the money. The files would vanish into some vault, and I would be left with nothing but a flash drive of illegal recordings that wouldn't hold up in court. I realized with a jolt that the timeline had tightened. I couldn't wait for the announcement. I couldn't wait for the toast. I had to get to that dossier before the man in the black suit did. I grabbed my purse. I checked to make sure I had the copy of the affidavit. I checked to make sure I had the Marin Ridge rejection letter with the case number. I walked out to my car. The drive to the Gilded Vine took 40 minutes. The snow started to fall halfway there, big, wet flakes that smeared against the windshield like white paint. I pulled into the driveway. The valet line was long, a snake of red taillights bleeding into the mist. I didn't wait for the valet. I parked on the grass, near the exit. I needed a quick getaway. I walked up the stone steps. The 25 balloon arch was still there, looking slightly deflated in the cold. The gold letters of Lila's Big 25 glittered under the floodlights. It was a beautiful lie. I walked to the door. The same girl was at the check-in table. She looked tired. When she saw me, her eyes widened. She reached for her radio. I wouldn't do that. I said, I placed the invitation on the table. Not the cream one, the legal one. I placed the cover sheet of the civil lawsuit on the velvet cloth. Genesis Reed versus Dennis and Marjorie Reed. I am not a guest. I said, I am a party to the proceedings. The girl stared at the paper. She didn't understand it, but she understood the tone. She took her hand off the radio. Go in, she whispered. I pushed open the double doors. The heat hit me first, then the noise. The party was in full swing. The room was packed. The air smelled of expensive beef and anxiety. I scanned the room. I saw the 25 ice sculpture melting in the center of the buffet. I saw the guests laughing, drinking, oblivious to the fact that they were extras in a felony. I saw my parents. They were at the head table, seated on a dais like royalty. Dennis was red-faced, laughing. Marjorie was preening. touching her necklace, surveying her kingdom, and I saw Lila. She was sitting between them, staring at her plate. She looked like a wax figure. And then I saw him, the man in the black suit. He was standing by the door to the private office, the same spot as before, but he wasn't just standing, he was checking his watch. He was looking at the stage. He was waiting. On the table in front of Dennis, next to the centerpiece, was a thick leather folder. It was embossed with the Reed family crest. The dossier. The game was simple. Dennis would stand up, make the speech, hand the dossier to the foundation director, and then the man in the black suit would take it away for safekeeping. I had to intercept it. I started to move through the crowd. I didn't float. I cut through them. I bumped into a donor, knocking wine onto his sleeve. I didn't apologize. I kept my eyes on the folder. Marjorie saw me first. Her head snapped toward me. Her eyes went wide. She stood up, knocking over her water glass. She grabbed Dennis's arm. He looked up. When he saw me, his face went from jovial to murderous in a split second. He stood up. He waved at security. But it was too late. I was already at the edge of the dance floor. The music stopped. The string quartet trailed off as the tension rippled through the room. I didn't stop. I walked up the steps to the dais. Marjorie stepped in front of me. "Get out," she hissed. "Get out right now." I looked at her. I looked at the woman who had given birth to me and then tried to erase me. "No," I said. I stepped around her. I walked to the table. I reached out and put my hand on the leather folder. Dennis lunged for it. His hand clamped over mine. His grip was crushing. "Let go." "Genesis," he snarled. "You are making a scene." I looked him in the eye. "I am not making a scene, Dad," I said, my voice carrying in the sudden silence of the room. "I am making a correction." I ripped the folder from his grip. The man in the black suit started moving toward the stage. I turned to face the room. I held the folder up. The party was over. The room was suspended in a moment of artificial perfection. Dennis stood at the podium, the microphone gripped in his hand like a scepter. The lights had dimmed to a warm, golden hue, designed to make the diamonds in the room sparkle and the wrinkles disappear. The air smelled of roast beef, expensive red wine, and the distinct, metallic scent of ambition. Dennis raised his glass. His face was flushed with the high of performance. "To our daughter," he boomed, his voice resonating off the vaulted ceiling. "To Lila, a brilliant young woman entering her 25th year, a quarter of a century of light, of grace, of promise. We are so proud to watch you step into your future." The crowd erupted. 200 people, donors, local politicians, social climbers, raised their crystal flutes. They cheered for the lie. They toasted the fraud. They swallowed the fabrication as easily as they swallowed the champagne. "Here! Here!" someone shouted from the back. Marjorie stood beside Dennis, beaming. She scanned the room with the predatory focus of a director on opening night. She checked the lighting. She checked the angles of the photographers who were crouching near the stage. She nodded almost imperceptibly at a waiter to refill a donor's glass. She was orchestrating the applause, ensuring the energy peaked at exactly the right decibel level to validate the check that was about to be handed over. Lila sat between them. She was smiling. But it was a gruesome thing. It was a smile held in place by fear. Her eyes were glassy, shimmering with tears that she was too terrified to shed. She looked like a porcelain doll that had been dropped and glued back together slightly wrong. I stood at the edge of the dais, the leather dossier heavy in my hand. I had just ripped it from my father's grip. The physical sensation of the leather was the only real thing in the room. Dennis looked down at me. His smile didn't waver, but his eyes were screaming. "Sit down. Genesis," he hissed through his teeth, barely moving his lips. "You are embarrassing yourself." I didn't sit. I didn't move. And then, the double doors at the back of the ballroom swung open. It wasn't a violent entrance. It was quiet. It was professional. But the effect was immediate. Silas walked in. He was not wearing a tuxedo. He was wearing a charcoal gray suit that absorbed the golden light of the room. He walked with a steady, purposeful gait. Flanking him were two other people, a man and a woman, also in business suits, carrying briefcases. They looked like auditors. They looked like consequences. The atmosphere in the room shifted instantly. It was as if someone had opened a window in the dead of winter. The temperature dropped. The chatter died down, replaced by a ripple of confused whispers. People turned in their chairs. The photographers lowered their cameras. Dennis saw them. His face went from flush to the color of old ash. He faltered. He lowered the microphone slightly, the feedback whining like a dying insect. Marjorie's smile froze. She looked at Silas, then at the guests, her eyes darting frantically. She laughed, a high, brittle sound that echoed uncomfortably in the silence. "It seems we have some late arrivals," she announced, her voice pitching up. "More friends to celebrate Lila." Silas didn't stop. He walked straight down the center aisle, the red sea of donors parting for him. He didn't look at the guests. He looked only at the stage. He stopped 10 feet from the dais. He didn't climb the steps. He stood on the floor, looking up at my parents. "Mr. Dennis Reed," Silas said. His voice was calm, but it carried to every corner of the silent room. "Mrs. Marjorie Reed, I am Silas Vance, Senior Compliance Officer for the Marin Ridge Foundation." The name Marin Ridge caused a stir. The foundation director, a heavy-set man sitting at table 1, stood up, looking confused. "Silas?" the director asked. "What is this? We are doing the presentation in 5 minutes." Silas didn't look at the director. He kept his eyes on my father. "There will be no presentation tonight." "Sir," Silas said. Dennis gripped the podium. "Now, see here," he stammered, the charm draining out of him like water from a cracked bucket. "This is a private family celebration. If you have administrative details to discuss, we can handle them on Monday. I am afraid that is not possible." Silas said, "We have received credible evidence regarding significant irregularities in the eligibility verification for the Youth Achievement Grant, specifically concerning the age and identity of the applicant." The word irregularities landed in the room like a grenade. A hush fell over the crowd. It was the kind of silence that was heavy and suffocating. "Irregularities?" Marjorie said. She stepped forward, her gold dress shimmering. "That is absurd. We have submitted every document requested. This is a clerical mistake." "You are ruining a young girl's birthday over paperwork?" She gestured to Lila, who was now trembling visibly. "Look at her," Marjorie pleaded to the room. "She is 25 years old. It is her silver year. Are we going to let bureaucrats spoil this moment?" A few guests murmured in agreement. Marjorie was good. She knew how to weaponize sentiment. I stepped forward. I walked to the center of the dais, standing between my parents and the crowd. I held the leather dossier against my chest. "It is not a clerical mistake, Mother," I said. My voice was steady. It surprised me. I wasn't shaking. I wasn't crying. I felt a cold, crystalline clarity. Marjorie spun on me, her face contorted. "Genesis, stop," she warned. "Do not do this." I turned to the room. I looked at the donors. I looked at the neighbors who had whispered about me for years. I looked at the foundation director. "My name is Genesis Reed," I said. "I am the twin sister of the applicant, Lila Reed." I held up the dossier. "In this folder are the documents my parents submitted to the foundation," I continued. "They contain an affidavit verifying Lila's age as 25. They contain a witness signature from me, attesting to that fact." I paused. The room was so quiet, I could hear the ice melting in the sculpture. I did not sign those documents. I said clearly. A gasp rippled through the room. My signature was forged. I stated, "My identity was used without my consent to validate a fraudulent claim. My sister is not 25. I am not 25. We are 33 years old." "Liar," Marjorie screamed. It was a shocking sound. The mask had fallen completely. She lunged toward me, her hands clawing at the air. But Dennis held her back. "She is lying," Marjorie shouted to the crowd, pointing a shaking finger at me. "She is mentally unstable. We have been trying to help her for years. She is jealous of her sister. She cannot stand to see anyone else being loved." She turned to the guests, tears streaming down her face. It was a performance worthy of an Oscar. "Please, forgive her." Marjorie sobbed. "She has been off her medication. She makes things up. She wants to destroy this family because she is miserable. Oh, God, this is so humiliating." The crowd swayed. I saw the doubt in their eyes. They wanted to believe the mother. They wanted to believe the tragedy of the sick daughter. It was a more comfortable story than fraud. I looked at Marjorie. She was sobbing into Dennis's shoulder, looking small and victimized. I reached into my purse. I pulled out a single sheet of paper. It wasn't the affidavit. It was the credit report. "Is the loan also a hallucination?" "Mother?" I asked. I held the paper up. $30,000. I read aloud. "Taken out in the name of Genesis Reed on January 15th. Proceeds used to pay the Gilded Vine venue. Proceeds used to pay Elite Event Catering. Proceeds used to pay Reed Consulting." I looked at the foundation director. "You are eating food paid for with identity theft." I said, "This party was not funded by family pride. It was funded by a loan taken out in my name, without my knowledge, by the people standing on this stage." I turned to Dennis. "You stole my credit to pay for a party to celebrate a lie." I said, "That is not mental illness. Dad, that is grand larceny." Dennis opened his mouth, but no sound came out. The charm was gone. The bluster was gone. He looked small. He looked like a man who had bet everything on a bluff and had just been called. The room turned. The sympathy evaporated. The guests looked at their plates. They looked at the exits. The shame was palpable. And then, a sound cut through the tension. It was the sound of a chair scraping against the stage floor. Lila stood up. She stood up slowly, as if her legs were made of lead. She wasn't looking at the cameras. She wasn't looking at Marjorie. She was looking at the floor. She walked to the podium. Dennis tried to grab her arm, but she pulled away with a sudden, violent jerk. "Lila, don't," Dennis whispered. Lila took the microphone from the stand. Her hands were shaking so hard the microphone rattled against her rings. She looked out at the sea of faces. She looked stripped. The makeup, the dress, the hair, it all looked like a costume she was wearing for a play she no longer wanted to be in. "I am not 25, she said. Her voice was quiet, hoarse, but it was amplified by the speakers, booming over the silent crowd. "I was born on January 18th, 1993, she said. "I am 33 years old." Marjorie let out a wail. "Lila, you are confused. You are in shock." Lila turned to look at her mother. "Stop. Mom," Lila said. "Just stop." She looked back at the audience. "I agreed to the lie," she said. Her voice broke. "I signed the papers. I let them change my records. I let them erase my history." "Why?" someone called out from the darkness. Lila took a breath. It was a ragged, painful sound. "Because they told me it would fix everything," she said. "Because they told me we were going to lose the house. They told me we were drowning in debt. They said if I just became 25 again, the trust would unlock, the grant would come through. They said it was the only way to survive." She looked at me. Her eyes were wide and terrified. "And because I was scared," she whispered, "I was scared of what they would do if I said no. I was scared they would do to me what they did to Genesis." She dropped the microphone. It hit the floor with a deafening thud. Lila sank to her knees on the stage, burying her face in her hands. It wasn't a dramatic faint. It was the collapse of a structure that could no longer support its own weight. The silence that followed was absolute. Then, chaos broke the spell. Dennis lunged at Lila. "You stupid girl!" he shouted. "You ungrateful, stupid girl!" Marjorie turned on me. "This is your fault!" she screamed. "You poisoned her! You ruined everything!" Silas stepped onto the stage. The two professionals with him moved fast. Positioning themselves between my parents and us, "Mr. Reed," Silas said, his voice hard as iron. "Step back." Dennis froze. He looked at Silas, then at the room. He saw the guests pulling out their phones. He saw the cameras recording. He realized finally, that he had lost control of the narrative. "I need all documentation regarding the application handed over immediately," Silas said, "specifically the dossier currently in Ms. Genesis Reed's possession." I handed the leather folder to Silas. "This contains the originals," I said. Silas took it. He handed it to the woman beside him. "Secure this," he said. Then, I saw movement near the side door. The man in the black suit, the one Lila had warned me about, was moving. He wasn't looking at the stage. He was moving toward the locked office door at the back of the room. He moved with a speed that was professional and terrifying. Dad saw him too. "No!" Dennis shouted. He tried to run off the stage, scrambling toward the office. "Not the files. You cannot go in there." But he couldn't get there. The path was blocked by the foundation director, who had stepped into the aisle, his face purple with rage. Dennis ran into the director. There was a scuffle. Dennis was shoved back. The man in the black suit reached the office door. He didn't use a key. He used a tool from his pocket, a quick, brutal motion, and the door clicked open. He slipped inside and closed it behind him. Dennis watched him go, and the color drained from his face completely. He looked like a man who had just watched his executioner enter the room. From the main entrance, a man in a beige trench coat walked in. He looked tired and bored. He walked straight up to the stage. "Dennis Reed? Marjorie Reed?" he asked. Dennis didn't answer. He was staring at the office door. Marjorie was weeping, clutching the tablecloth. The man didn't wait for an answer. He thrust a stack of papers into Dennis's chest. Dennis instinctively grabbed them. He did the same to Marjorie. "You are served," the man said. "Civil suit for financial fraud, identity theft, an emergency injunction. Have a nice night." The room erupted. The whispers turned into a roar. Guests were standing up, grabbing their coats, trying to leave before the police arrived. It was a stampede of silken tuxedos. Donors looked at my parents with expressions of pure disgust. It was the look you give something rotting on the sidewalk. They had been splashed with the Reed family filth, and they were desperate to scrub it off. I stood on the stage, watching the empire crumble. I didn't feel happy. I didn't feel triumphant. Revenge wasn't sweet. It tasted like ash and adrenaline. But it was clean. Marjorie looked up from the papers in her hand. Her mascara was running in black streaks down her face. She looked at me. There was no regret in her eyes. There was no realization of wrongdoing. There was only pure, distilled hatred. She stepped close to me. Silas tried to intervene, but I held up a hand. I wanted to hear it. "You will regret this," she hissed. Her voice was a serpent's rattle. "You think you won? You have nothing. You have no family. You have no home. You will have nobody." I looked at her. I looked at the woman who had forged my signature and sold my sister. "I would rather be alone than be you," I said. I turned my back on her. I walked over to Lila. She was still on her knees, shaking. "Come on," I said. I reached down and took her hand. Lila looked up. She looked surprised that I was there. She gripped my hand like a lifeline. I pulled her up. She was unsteady, her heels slipping on the polished floor. We walked off the stage together. We walked past Silas, who nodded at us. We walked past the donors who parted like the Red Sea, staring at us with morbid fascination. We walked past the girl at the check-in table who was staring with her mouth open. We walked out the double doors. We walked down the red carpet, past the floodlights, past the deflated balloon arch. We walked out into the cold night air. The snow was falling harder now. It covered the gravel parking lot in a blanket of white. It was quiet. The noise of the party was muffled behind the thick walls of the estate. We stopped near my car. The air was biting, freezing the sweat on my skin. Lila shivered. She wasn't wearing a coat. I took off my wrap and put it around her shoulders. She pulled it tight. We stood there for a long time, watching the snow fall. "What happens now?" Lila asked. Her voice was barely audible. Lost in the wind, I looked back at the venue. I could see flashing lights approaching from the highway. "Police, now," I said. "We tell the truth. To the police. To the lawyers. To everyone." Lila nodded. She looked terrified, but she also looked relieved. The weight of the lie was gone. "Will they go to prison?" she asked. "Probably," I said. "And us?" she asked. "I don't know," I said. My phone buzzed in my purse. I ignored it. It buzzed again, and again. I pulled it out. It wasn't a text. It was a voicemail notification. The number was blocked, but the transcription preview was scrolling across the screen. I squinted at the bright light of the phone. The label on the voicemail read, "Westbridge Records, Urgent Correction." I frowned. The hospital? At this hour? I pressed play. I held the phone up between us so Lila could hear. The voice was crackly, old, and urgent. "Ms. Reed, this is the archivist at Westbridge. You asked us to dig into the Twin Designation Amendment from 1993. We found the original microfiche, the one that was supposed to be sealed." The voice paused. There was the sound of shuffling papers. "Ms. Reed, the amendment didn't just swap the birth times, it swapped the medical history. We found the original blood type analysis. One of the infants, the one designated as Twin A, died 3 hours after birth. The records show a death certificate was issued and then retracted, and replaced with a live birth certificate for a second child." I stopped breathing. Lila grabbed my arm, her nails digging into my skin. "Ms. Reed, according to the original log, there was no twin sister. There was only one surviving infant, the other child, the one they call Lila. She was brought in from the county ward 3 days later. The adoption records were sealed under the name Reed. You aren't twins. You aren't even related." The voicemail ended. The silence of the snow was deafening. I looked at Lila. She looked at me. We stood in the parking lot of the fake birthday party, in the wreckage of the fake family, staring at each other, strangers. I looked at the venue, where the flashing blue lights of the police cruisers were just turning into the driveway. The story wasn't over. It had just begun. Thank you for listening to Stay Home. Nobody wants you there. It has been a journey through the dark corridors of the Reed family, and I am grateful you walked it with me. I would love to know where you are listening from. Please leave a comment below and tell me which part of the world you are in. It is always fascinating to see how far these stories travel. If you enjoyed the twists, the deception, and the ultimate unraveling of Dennis and Marjorie's empire, please consider subscribing to Revenge Stories. There are many more families with secrets to expose, and I would hate for you to miss the next confession. Share your thoughts in the comments. What do you think Genesis and Lila should do now? Should they walk away, or should they dig up the rest of the graveyard? Until next time.